So we have something in South Dakota called a referred law, that if we, as the people of South Dakota, see that the legislature made a mistake, that they can come back, and if you get so many signatures, we had to get over 17,000 signatures in 90 days across the state. Well, what happened was we got about 38,000 signatures.
Wow.
And we put that back on the November ballot, and we were able to defeat that bill. So, and again, some people say, well, we have a representative republic. We do, and that process worked. But then the people were able to come back. It wasn't like we just, have a willy-nilly vote. You had to get the signatures. You had to get the people's support again to get something like that back on the ballot. And so that happened in tandem with, the primary, obviously was in June. And we got those new legislators elected. And then in November, we were able to defeat SB 201. And then this year, 2025, I brought House Bill 1052, which eliminated eminent domain for CO2 pipelines. And because of the pressure that was brought by the people, even those legislators that were on the wrong side of this the first time around basically were put on notice that you better vote for this because the people are paying attention. And so we got the bill through. The governor signed the bill.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
Good morning. Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to the State of Freedom, and a special shout out to any Voice of the People USA radio listeners who are joining us this morning. We are so pleased to be joined by a special guest today. Karla Lems is a state representative in South Dakota. She's a small business owner and a farmer, and she's running for lieutenant governor. She's led the charge in South Dakota in getting eminent domain for CCS killed in the state. It was a hard-fought battle, but they prevailed, so we clearly have a lot to learn from her. We're so excited to hear what she has to say this morning. And of course, we will also be giving an overview of what all happened at the legislature this week, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Per usual. Before we get into all of that craziness, let me read the scripture of the day. It's Hebrews chapter 2, verse 11, and then 14 through 18. And this is what it says. Jesus, the Holy One, makes us holy, and as sons and daughters, we now belong to his same Father. So he's not ashamed or embarrassed to introduce us as his brothers and sisters. For he has said, I'll skip that for he has said, and I'll go down to 14. It says, since all his children have flesh and blood, so Jesus became human to fully identify with us. He did this so that he could experience death and annihilate the effects of the intimidating accuser who holds against us the power of death. By embracing death, Jesus sets free those who live their entire lives in bondage to the tormenting dread of death. For it is clear that he didn't do this for the angels, but for all the sons and daughters of Abraham. This is why he had to be a man and take hold of our humanity in every way. He made us his brothers and sisters and became our merciful and faithful king priest before God, as the one who removed our sins to make us one with him. He suffered and endured every test and temptation so that he can help us every time we pass through the ordeals of life. And isn't it so good that we just get to rest in the finished work of our faithful King and High Priest, Jesus? He made a way for us when there was no way to be in right relationship with the Father. And when we believe that he is who he says he is and that he lived a perfect life on earth and became the only acceptable sacrifice for our sin, which he took on himself and then raised himself from the dead. Can we just say, can we just stop and appreciate that he raised himself from the dead? That's pretty stunning. That's pretty, as Christians, we kind of roll through that statement and just think, oh yeah, he raised from the dead. No, he raised himself from the dead and he did it to bring the power of resurrection life to us and I just want us to say that, because he did that, we can confidently look at the days ahead and say, my God conquered death to restore me to my place of right relationship with him and inheritance. So whom or what shall I fear? And that's the attitude I want to have. That's the attitude I would, I think a lot of our listeners have. Carla, that's the attitude you have, I believe, for sure, because you've stared down some pretty dark forces. So thank you for joining us. I just was really touched by that scripture this morning and really strengthened by it, because we are in fierce times.
We are. We are in fierce times, Danielle. But the scripture was so timely this morning. You think about, and you're so right. We do tend to gloss over things that are just so extraordinary in the scripture. We gloss over it, and we don't really understand the deep import of it. I mean, Jesus became fully human so that we could have a true advocate before the Father, someone who understands us, someone who relates to us, someone who suffered the way that we do. And so we do have a true advocate before the Father in Jesus. And, speaking of advocates, when you read about Karla Lems, I mean, it's like what she has done, and other leaders in South Dakota with regard to this carbon capture sequestration. The history of it is just extraordinary. Karla, first of all, welcome to the State of Freedom today. What a privilege to have you with us.
Well, thank you. And I think I'm joining like-minded believers this morning, which is even greater uh, than fighting together on these constitutional issues, because we know that for such a time as this, God has a purpose and a plan. And what we do here is we do what is right, true, and just to the best of our ability. And then we leave the rest in God's hands, because he is going to do what he is going to do.
That is so true, Karla. What you just said, it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. It's either John Adams or John Quincy Adams. He said, we do our duty and the results are up to God. And
Yes.
in a certain sense, that takes a lot of pressure off of us, because we're going to do what we're supposed to do and let God handle the results. And I know that's what you've done in South Dakota and continue to do. Um, it's so interesting about the history of carbon capture sequestration in South Dakota. Can you talk a little bit about uh, the political aspect of it? Because my understanding is that there were a number of Republicans who were punished at the polls because they did not do the will of the citizens, and then a new crop of Republicans come in, and y'all got it done at that point. So tell us about that, because the reason why I'm asking is that we may be in a similar situation right here in Louisiana now, where we've had a number of Republicans who have uh, are responsible for defeating some very good protections for private property when it comes to CCS and other issues. And they may well be in trouble at the ballot box as well because of that, because of the outrage. So tell us a little bit about the history of South Dakota and how you got to the point where y'all actually got it accomplished.
Sure. So I will back up. We've been in this fight since about 2021, and that was before I was in the legislature. Some people think I got into the legislature for that fight, and that's really not the case. I was very concerned about what was happening in around 2020. I had already been involved in the Republican Party in our county, but I was not an elected official in that sense. So I received a letter in the mail from Summit Carbon Solutions, as well as Navigator Heartland Greenway, which was another CO2 pipeline that was coming through South Dakota, or wanted to come through. And when I looked at that, it was about the time I had already decided to run. And I looked at that paper and that letter, and I said, this is the Green New Deal. I recognized it. Literally, I remembered the moment I was sitting at my desk reading that letter. I set it aside because I thought, well, I'm not interested in this because I don't believe in the Green New Deal, and I don't want to participate. Not that I was against pipelines, not that I was against ethanol. And that's the picture that was starting to be painted, was if you're not for this project, then you're against pipelines, you're an environmentalist, which is absolutely not the truth. So we started to embark on that. I got elected into the legislature shortly after that, and started my first term. And that was so fast forward to 2023. January, that's when I was sworn in for the first time. And I had a group of landowners at the time come to me and say, would you carry a bill? We see that you also have been affected. It was going to come, both pipelines were slated to come through our family's ground. And so I was somewhat invested that way, but it was the bigger picture of this is overreach. And in our state of South Dakota, we were finding out that they could use eminent domain for these pipelines because they were here, what they were claiming under our state law that they were a common carrier carrying a commodity. Well, we started to make the argument that they were not a common carrier and they were not carrying a commodity if you're going to bury it in the ground in North Dakota. And so, of course, you have to remember this is both pipelines were going to be 5 states. Navigator was heading to Illinois to sequester, and Summit was heading to North Dakota. So I carried a bill my first year. I was very nervous. I thought so many people's futures and property are on the line, and I'm going to do my best. Well, we did get that bill out of the House, which was basically saying no eminent domain for CO2 pipelines, that we're going to receive a credit with a 45Q tax credit. So it passed the House, it died in the Senate committee, and that was already, we knew the intent, the outcome of that committee before we got there. It was already pre-decided, and I know that for a fact. And so fast forward to the next, well, then shortly after that, we had a man in our state, his name, a rancher up by Aberdeen, his name was Jared Bosley. And after in 2023, it was about, I think in maybe April, the surveyors came onto his ground from Summit Carbon Solutions. They were armed, and it was a complete overstep of what these things should look like in our state. And I was very alarmed. I don't live in that part of the state. I'm down in the southeast corner. And so I got a call from another farmer rancher up in that same area. And he's like, Carla, you can't believe what's going on up here. And so I was like, I need to set eyes on this. And why isn't anybody doing anything? So we got a group of us new legislators and some that had been there a while. And I said, are you guys ready to do a road trip and see this for yourselves? So we went up there and ended up turning into a little property rights rally, if you will, at the courthouse in Little Leola, South Dakota in McPherson County. And so we were able to go around and talk to some of the people that were being affected by this. So fast forward to 2024, Representative Speaker John Hanson, who is now running for governor in our state, he brought another bill similar to the one that I had brought. Well, it didn't make it through. And, so it's kind of this recurring theme that, the big companies are coming in against us. And literally, we're talking about BlackRock. We're talking about Continental Resources. These are the companies involved in these pipelines, multi-billion dollar companies that really have way more power and money than we do. Yeah. And so, but if we fast forward then to the year 2020, well, in 2024, then after that session, we had our primary. And we got to work. And so this was a host of people across the state working together. I'm telling you, it was a nonpartisan issue. We were able to network. We had captains in first of all, we got a lot of people elected, like you said. And so we were able to flip. There were 14 incumbents that lost their seats. Now, 11 of those were voted on the wrong side of these issues. Wow. Oh, and I have to add, it wasn't only John Hanson's bill that died, but there was a pipeline bill that was brought called Senate Bill 201, and they deemed that the landowner bill of rights. Well, I will tell you, on the floor of the House, I called it the pipeline bill of rights. So you know how they take something and they make it look so good, but when you start digging down, it's actually the opposite of what they call it. And so that bill had passed. So we have something in South Dakota called a referred law, that if we, as the people of South Dakota, see that the legislature made a mistake, that they can come back. And if you get so many signatures, we had to get over 17,000 signatures in 90 days across the state. Well, what happened was we got about 38,000 signatures.
Wow.
And we put that back on the November ballot, and we were able to defeat that bill. And so, and again, some people say, well, we have a representative republic. We do, and that process worked. But then the people were able to come back. It wasn't like we just, have a willy-nilly vote. You had to get the signatures. You had to get the people's support again to get something like that back on the ballot. And so that happened in tandem with, well, the primary, obviously was in June, and we got those new legislators elected. And then in November, we were able to defeat SB 201. And then this year, 2025, I brought House Bill 1052, which eliminated eminent domain for CO2 pipelines. And because of the pressure that was brought by the people, even those legislators that were on the wrong side of this the first time around basically were put on notice that you better vote for this because the people are paying attention. And so we got the bill through. The governor signed the bill. Of course, we had a change in governor at the time. Kristi Noem went on to be Homeland Security Secretary. So Larry Roden came into that spot as the lieutenant governor and took over. So the bill was signed. And what we've seen lately is Iowa now has followed in our steps. It's not the exact same bill, but they've gotten a lot more protections. But now we're dealing with federal preemption, and maybe you guys want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do, because when we spoke earlier this week, you put me on notice that you're not just going to be fighting this at your own doorstep, but there's a heck of a fight that should be happening in Washington as well. Would you talk a little bit about what you're seeing on that front?
Yes, so it's really happening in real time right now. We are really watching what's happening. Actually, on the call that I was on before with you guys, we're trying to figure out exactly what happened because they just passed that bill in the middle of the night in the House, and that is that concurrent resolution that has the big beautiful bill, right?
Yeah.
So there were some provisions in there though to amend the Natural Gas Act. We believe those provisions were pulled out, but our concern was that they were going to be putting that back in. Now, what we have heard early on, and I should know this within the next, probably before we're off the call, is if that really actually did remain out and that was out of the bill when they passed it. We are hearing that it was, and we're hoping that that is the case. But again, we have to continue to keep watching this because it will pass over to the Senate. They could try to put it back in. You know how these things happen.
Yeah.
So, but that is really an overreach of the federal government. So they were amending the Natural Gas Act to basically say that we are going to preempt any state or local law when it comes to the routing, the placement of pipelines for carbon dioxide pipelines, for oil pipelines, and for hydrogen pipelines. So they would put them in the same category as natural gas. Plus, they had a $10 million fast track permitting process included in there as well. So again, you're going to pit the big companies against the people.
Yeah. And it is a textbook example, Carla, of federal overreach. The Constitution reserves precisely this type of plenary authority to the states, particularly when carbon capture sequestration itself is becoming increasingly questioned with regard to its scientific validity. We've consistently called it a scam. It is not a public good. And the position that we've had here in Louisiana, our group and many others, is that you just don't have the right to tell a private property owner what he must do with his or her own property. That is a direct assault on a core foundational principle of our Constitution, private property. And yet we have Republicans here in this state who have cowed before precisely the type of entities that you're talking about right now to defeat bill after bill after bill that would provide local authority and real protection for private property owners here in the state of Louisiana.
A number of
And
them who have something to gain from it personally and
yes,
directly.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
a number
Yeah.
of them who are being enriched by this scam. There's no question about it. So South Dakota serves as a tremendous source of inspiration for us because believe me, every voter and every constituent is going to know specifically how these Republicans voted on these issues. And so it's just wonderful to see. Let me ask you this, Carla. I'm assuming that the 11 of the 14 who were defeated in the elections. Was that centered on their position on carbon capture sequestration? Did that have a lot to do with it?
Absolutely. Yes, they were targeted specifically for that issue because, again, private property rights, what George Washington said, and many of the people still in South Dakota understand this. You cannot, freedom and property rights are inseparable. You cannot have one without the other. And so, we have a lot of people, especially up in the northern part of the state, that their ancestors came here from countries like Russia, the Ukraine, and they fled because their property was being confiscated by the government. So we still have roots that go back far enough that people see tyranny begin and they stand up against it here in South Dakota. And so I believe that courage begets courage. We have got to stand up and recognize these things for what they are. And like you said, this is a land grab. This is all about getting our property. And one thing that concerns me, we had a really good bill here in South Dakota that we passed, and it was about foreign ownership of ag land. And we passed that bill, which I was very happy to be a part of. But that did not include easements. And that is the way that they're getting around some of these things because they do not, in law, it does not consider having an easement the ownership of that property. So it's a right to the property, right? So they are in these easements, they're able to, in the contract, it says they own it, or they own the easement, but they can mortgage it, they can lease it, they can assign it to someone else. And they also have the right to enter your property from any four corners to get to that easement. So the ownership of, that's just one other aspect of this. Obviously, there's the safety aspect. Obviously, there's just the overreach of the eminent domain and everything. But the foreign ownership in these things is very alarming. And we believe early on, you can Google this and see that even our governor early on was concerned with the foreign ownership in the Summit pipeline and that China was involved. So we really have to, they set these things up over many years and they get laws that are set up. Now that we look back, we can see it. Our survey law, all of those things had to be right in place for this to go through. And it wasn't only here, it was in the other four states as well. And so, these plans and schemes have been going on for a long time. And of course, we know the father of lies is very good at that. And so we have to be diligent and be on guard all of the time with all of these laws that are being passed. But right now, I really believe this is one of the biggest issues that our country is facing, and that is this federal overreach. And we have got to stand up for states' rights.
Yeah, we absolutely have to stand up for states' rights. And I believe what General Flynn's battle cry has been for the last 4 or 5 years, local action equals national impact. And we can't just say, well, Trump's in power now, so we can all just sit down and relax. We have battles on every front. If you really take a step back and look around, war is waging all around us on every single issue imaginable. I was wondering, Carla, since you have been so active and at the forefront of this, have you heard or have any indication from the Trump administration on when they may dry up the federal funding for this? Because I saw that they did something to cut off or suspend federal funding for windmills not too long ago, a couple weeks back. So I'm hoping that we'll see similar action that will give us a little reprieve so we can do our fighting, but not have to feel so quite under the gun on this issue.
Well, this is what I'll say about that. I have been a supporter of President Trump. Really appreciate so many of the things that he has done. I'm quite alarmed by the recent trip to Saudi Arabia and the people that were on that trip. And we also see that, NextEra, some of the ownership that is involved with NextEra, which is wind, they were on that trip to Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
And there's a podcast that's out there. I can link it to you later. But somebody just went through all of those people that traveled over there. And, we're just seeing some things in real time that are concerning to us that are really concerned about property rights.
Yeah.
And so we've had some, some mixed messages, if you will, from the administration on that. And so that is really where, and this 45Q tax credit, that is the thing that is driving all of this. And
Yeah.
so that really needs to be stripped out, or this is not going to stop until that money is gone.
Until that money is gone. And we have a call to action we have a call to action about the 45Q tax credits. The big arguments that are made here in favor of the carbon capture sequestration, Carla, is that, hey, oil and gas is for it. The big oil and gas companies are for it. How could it be bad? Number one, and number two, this is going to create a lot of jobs. This is going to create a lot of jobs for Louisiana citizens. How could you be opposed to this? Well, and the response to that, of course, is that I don't care if oil and gas is trying to grab as much of our tax dollars and tax credits as they can as well. That doesn't mean we have to support something that's bad just because oil and gas supports it for the wrong reasons and is falsely trying to conflate carbon capture sequestration, dumping this stuff in the ground with oil and gas development. That's just a lie. Talk about the father of lies. And secondly, it creates jobs, but it creates jobs that are being propped up and funded with our money and our tax credits. This is not an enterprise that would be profitable in the private enterprise if it had to stand on its own 2 feet. It wouldn't be.
So let's let it stand on its own 2 feet. Please.
So let's let it stand on its own 2 feet.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we as conservative Republicans believe, right? In the free market. And this is a federal subsidy that, you're exactly right, is just propping this whole thing up. And if you pull that away, it will not stand. And, those of us, again, we can have the best and the most shiny object in the room that's going to help us all out, right? But if we have to strip constitutional rights away to do something like that, then it's not worth it, because that's exactly what we're all fighting for, right? Is our right to freedom. And we have a constitution that we always have to go back to, and we always have to look through that lens first. Is this good? Is it constitutional? And then let's move forward from there. But if it doesn't check that box, then we better stop.
Yep. Don't pass go. Don't collect $200.
Yeah. And that's a great point. And there are legitimate uses, as you know, Carla, for eminent domain. It's in, I believe, the Fifth Amendment of the U.S.
Yes.
Constitution, but it has been so contorted and so abused that people it's just been completely immolated, really, as far as its original purpose. And it's not even though they're expropriating private property for a good purpose. You can't even say that about this. They're expropriating private property at the altar of a scam. And even the people who support this at this point, Carla, they no longer talk about the fact that it protects the environment or that we need it for the environment, which was the original justification for allowing eminent domain in our state for carbon capture sequestration. And at this point, they don't even talk about it anymore. Even they know it's a scam.
Yes. I was in a stockholders meeting, actually, with one of the ethanol companies. And that question was asked by one of the farmers: how much is this going to reduce CO2 in the atmosphere? And they said, well, really, very little. But this is exactly what they said. This is a business opportunity.
Built on nothing, literally built on thin air.
Yeah.
This really goes back to, I think, the Kelo decision, which was in the Supreme Court. I believe it was 2005, and where they overrode, they used eminent domain against a private property owner for business purposes, and it was Pfizer, I believe, at the time. But I talked to somebody that was in Congress back then, and he said he had a private conversation with Justice Scalia, and Scalia said this was a bad decision and it will be overturned someday. And I think that this is something that we need to go back, we need to look at, and we need to get this right for the people of this country, because if we do not, our freedoms are at risk.
Amen. And Chris, maybe that's something we can get the Pelican Institute to look at, because I smell a challenge coming somewhere.
I think so too. There's no question about it. And you're so right, Carla. And what a lot of people don't understand, and this is, really this point goes beyond simple private property. Any deprivation, government deprivation of our freedom and liberty in any facet of life, it never comes about suddenly. It never comes about in a way that alarms people initially. It's always, as Madison said, sort of death by 1,000 cuts. And unless the water is pouring directly into someone's own front door, they don't think that there's any issue. And really goes to the issue of apathy. And what we have to continue to try to inform people and educate people about is that the moment you allow even the slightest deprivation of a core constitutional freedom in the slightest degree, the precedent has set. And from there, it simply expands. From there, it's simply a matter of degree. So I have a deep appreciation for your point that we have to confront these things as they occur.
Yeah. And I might also add to that, Carla, you're so right about the enemy planning these things years and years in advance, and having step by step plotted out how they're going to approach the whole entire basically the supply chain of the issue. And I think as conservatives, as constitutionalists, we need to be in the same position. We need to finally get a place. At some point, we will hopefully no longer be on the defensive, and we can start making offensive wins. And I think you serve as a great reminder that, we're behind the 8 ball, and our adversary is already far down the road from us.
Yeah, and another thing that Carla is a great example of, Danielle, is the fact that it's possible to suffer some defeats in some battles and
That's
still
right.
win the war. And that is a great, great lesson and a great testament to perseverance and tenacity, because that's exactly what happened in South Dakota. But Carla, one more question here that I wanted to ask you. You mentioned some other states that are following South Dakota's example. Could you talk a little bit more about what some other states are doing consistent with what South Dakota has done?
Sure. Well, of course, our friends in Iowa, they have been fighting this as well. And so we have something called the Free Soil Foundation that we've kind of started joining together with some other states. That's based out of Iowa, but I have been a part of that as well. And we know that we cannot always defeat these things, especially if we're going to start looking at some things coming down from the federal government. We need to be joining together in things like these and podcasts and efforts that we can join together with others to bring our ideas, tell what's happening in real time on the ground, and even comparing legislation of what's worked, what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so Iowa just recently passed a very similar law to ours, probably not quite as strong, but bringing some real protections for Iowans in that state. And I believe it's still awaiting the governor's signature, Governor Reynolds down there. But hopefully she will be signing that. And also, we've worked with people down in Nebraska. I've been down to speak in Nebraska before. Nebraska has, obviously, each of these states has their own laws and the ways that they do these things. And I will just mention, too, in South Dakota, these things have to go through our Public Utilities Commission. Our Public Utilities Commission has voted no 3 different times for a permit, first of all for Navigator, and then 2 times for Summit. And so they are elected in our state. That's another important point to make. So they are accountable to the people, whereas in Iowa, theirs are appointed. And I will say that their IUC has caved on this. And again, but they're appointed by the governor. And so you have all of those ties. And the more that we look at these things, the more I see how important it is to many of these officials that they be responsible to the people directly, and it makes a difference. And also, in Minnesota, we have some movement there. Obviously, they're a blue state, And but they have been working on these things as well. Again, they have some different laws. North Dakota as well. North Dakota, it's a really tough fight up there because oil and gas is so big, and they've just, a lot of people have just sold out to that, and just, but there are still some people. They did get them to move the CO2 pipeline, the line. Senator Magrum up there is a great fighter for on behalf of property rights, and so he's been doing a great job. Illinois, we know, had a moratorium on CO2 pipelines, but this federal overreach would even override that if it was in there. Yeah, so anything like that would just be overridden. But we've heard from many states that are concerned about not just the CO2 pipelines, but just the overreach with wind and solar and all of that. Oklahoma has reached out to us. And so there's movement in all of these states, but it takes time getting up to speed. What is our state law? What's allowed? What's not? What needs to be changed? And, we can try to help with those efforts and just to know what we did here. But just what exactly we did may not work in your state, but we can certainly try to help navigate that for you. So,
Yeah. And who knows, you may end up being down here in Louisiana testifying before a committee at some point. We'd
yes,
sure love to meet
yes,
you. We'd sure love
sure.
to have you down here. We'll treat you right. Uh,
Okay,
but
sounds good.
Danielle, do we have time for me to ask Carla one more question, specific question here?
If Carla has time.
Do you have
Sure.
Carla? Because I'm very intrigued by what you said about the common carrier issue with regard to carbon capture sequestration in South Dakota. Could you explain a little bit more about that issue as it relates to the legislation being successful in South Dakota, the common carrier
Sure.
issue?
Well, and so one thing that I failed to tell you is this also made its way through the courts, and so this went all the way to our South Dakota Supreme Court because Summit was saying they were a common carrier carrying a commodity, which is how our law reads. If you're a common carrier carrying a commodity for hire, then you have the right of eminent domain in our state law. And so we all know that common carriers are things, that are carrying something that's going to be, like a railroad or, a natural gas pipeline or things like that.
Something that
And
serves some public
something that
utility, some
serves,
public
yes,
usefulness.
and that is a public use, right? And we kept making the point that this was not a public use. It was not a commodity. This wasn't something that I was going to use or that you were going to use or your brother was going to use
There's
or
no
the town
product.
next door was going to use. So it wasn't a public use. It wasn't a commodity because it was going to be sequestered in the ground in North Dakota, buried in a rock formation. And so we made that case and it went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled on our side, on the people's side, that this is how they said it. They have not proved that they are a common carrier carrying a commodity. So we were able to capitalize on that ruling. Then we had the referred law after that we defeated at the ballot box, and then we carried that forward into the legislation with House Bill 1052, which said you cannot use eminent domain. And so we were able to say, not because they were a common carrier, that didn't have anything to do this time with my bill, but we as a legislature have the right to say who can use eminent domain in our state or not. So that argument was gone that they were a common carrier. But beyond that, we just said, if you're a CO2 pipeline, you can't use eminent domain in the state of South Dakota. And so, of course, they were threatening to sue us and all of this. Well, that didn't happen. And so did I answer your question? I'm sorry.
You did.
Okay.
So ultimately, the ultimate passage of your bill prohibiting eminent domain for carbon capture pipelines, that was not based on the common carrier argument?
No.
Okay.
No. So because we already felt like that had been determined with the Supreme Court ruling, but we were just saying, we're just going to say you absolutely can't use eminent domain if you're a CO2 pipeline. There's too many other things that go on with it. There's safety issues. There's this or that. Now, that does not mean that we prohibited CO2 pipelines in our state. We just said you can't use eminent domain. So if you're a private person and you want to sign up, We always said from the very beginning, you should be able to say yes or no thank you to a project.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
the
is
flip
what
side.
that's what the free market is about. And so, but if you're going to try to come into our state and to shove something down our throats that we do not want and force us to do it, because you're saying you're a common carrier or you're saying you're carrying a commodity, it doesn't matter in this case what you say you are. If you're a CO2 pipeline, you cannot use eminent domain here. And I will just say that specifically, one of the pipeline companies came in and they were a bully, and they went around. They tried to get a favor in all of these different counties. And I will say our previous GOP chairman was involved in it. These tentacles go deep into not into the Republican. It's both. It's the
Yeah.
Republican Party and it's the Democrat Party. And we kind of deemed them two different things. We called Navigator the Democrat pipeline because it had
Yeah,
ties more to the Democrats. And we had Summit Carbon Solutions that had a lot of ties to a lot of Republicans.
yeah.
And so, but at the end of the day, they were corporatists. They were out for the money. They were out for the land. And yes, there's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is the 45Q tax credit. But I think there's even other things that maybe even to this day we don't all know what's involved in that.
Yeah.
Must be.
What would you suggest, Carla, to our listeners down here in Louisiana that they should do with respect to the federal action that's going on? And what
Well,
specifically we should be telling our reps in DC?
yeah, so we have to really dig down and see what's still in this bill. But even regardless, if these pipeline preemptions have been stripped out, we still have to go over after that 45Q tax provision. And as it passes over to the Senate, they still have the opportunity to strip that out. We need to get rid of that. And so I think that, especially when it's in regard to CO2 pipelines. And so I think that still need to be engaged on this issue. You need to be contacting your senators. And I think that they are starting to get the message that the people are involved. They are watching these things. And so they had better be on notice that we are not going to just sit idly by anymore and let these constitutional rights really be stripped away from us. Because if this domino falls, then you will continue to see more and more abuse of the United
Yep.
States citizen as time goes on. And like I said before, property is tied to freedom.
Yeah,
And
no question about it. That's a
yes,
great way to say that, Carla. And it's I think that you're worth quoting here because I think every one of if I could stamp this on the forehead without being accused of battery to every rhino Republican in the legislature in Louisiana, I would. But this is a quote from you. This is a power that can be lorded over landowners to threaten or coerce them into something that they would not normally do if they had the freedom to say, no, thank you. Well, in South Dakota, guess what? Because of you and efforts of many like you, they have the freedom to say, no, thank you. And we're going to put Louisiana in that position at some point because of your inspiration and efforts. So God bless you and thank you for all your good work.
well, thank you both so much. I appreciate both of you and all the work that you are doing as well.
Thank you, Carla, and good luck with your race. The secret to losing weight 2 times faster has gone viral. See the transformations hundreds of thousands of people are experiencing around the world with the Slender Eyes drops. These homeopathic drops are proven to control appetite, support thyroid function, help balance the body's pH, improve energy, boost mood, and increase metabolic rate. I've heard firsthand testimonials from droppers in their 20s to droppers in their 80s who say that the Slender Eyes drops have completely revolutionized their lives. Try the drops today to see the results for yourself. To learn more about the Slender Eyes drops or other incredible natural wellness and lifestyle products, email me at info@freedomstate.us and put drops in the subject line or visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. We also have links to those in the show notes. Thank you for supporting the State of Freedom. Okay, Chris. Well, it was great to talk to Carla. She put a lot into this. I mean, first of all, when I talked to her earlier this week, she told me that they were trying to go across her property with this. So that talk about have some skin in the game whenever it comes
You better
to
believe it. And that was occurring. So she really had a vested interest in it,
yeah,
even before she ran for state rep.
yeah,
Right? And she was very alarmed by it. And I just think that's such a powerful example about what can happen when people get together and work hard. And so much of it has to do, as she said, with exposing and removing the dead fish
yeah,
in the legislature and getting new people in there and making sure that they do the right thing.
yeah.
And we can certainly accomplish that. Speaking, Danielle, of doing the right thing or the wrong thing, boy, did some things happen this week.
Yeah, well, you had your work cut out for you. I
Yeah.
know you tried once again to clone yourself, but were probably unsuccessful in that endeavor. But
So my
maybe,
notes are all over the place. I've got all kind of numbers running through my head here, but we'll sled on here.
all right. Well, if you would, maybe I can just run us through and ask you for some updates, Chris. I know on Tuesday there was a fair bit going on. I think more happened again on Wednesday, but Tuesday in House Natural Resources and Environment, Senator Facey's bill to put an end to the geoengineering, to put an end to weather modification, unanimously passed the committee, and we believe it should be headed to the House floor next week. I don't know if you were able to hear any of the debate around that. I'm
Well, I
happy
was
to hear that it was unanimous.
It was unanimous. I was rushing to get down there after our podcast. Obviously, we have a call to action up on this, and the committee got hundreds of emails from our group supporting the legislation. I was not there in time to testify on it, but I did do a green card. They know that the LACAG supports the legislation, and I don't think it got any opposition in the committee.
Yeah.
And fortunately, it got out of there. So now it goes on to the House floor, and we are very optimistic about this, getting these pollutants out of the air. I mean, what an incredible, the thing, Danielle, that Katie's like, look, I'm very, very happy that this bill's moving forward. It's very important. There shouldn't be any opposition, but Katie's still upset that there's not criminal penalties
Yeah.
attached to this. She said, this
Yeah.
is a crime. This is a
It's true.
fundamental violation of human autonomy
It's
and
true.
informed consent. Why are there not
Absolutely.
criminal penalties associated with this?
Absolutely. And I think, Chris, that's part of the reason there was no industry there, remarkably, to oppose the legislation, because they would be telling us who they are, which they have not yet done.
Yeah. It's interesting, Danielle. There was a guy there testifying who was there from, I think, out of state, from California,
Okay.
testifying against the legislation.
Oh, really? They don't like
Yes.
clean air over there in
Yeah.
California.
And so the fact that he came in from California to testify against this legislation sort of puts the lie to the notion that what's coming out of the back of these planes is simply contrails, just plain exhaust,
I'm
right?
surprised someone had the gall to show up, but I guess nobody from inside the state did. They had to rely on somebody from outside the state.
No, he knew that he could seek egress quickly after the hearing back to
Yeah.
California.
Uh-huh.
But fortunately, people treated him well because we're in Louisiana and we're gonna treat people graciously. But yeah, I just thought it was very telling that we had an out-of-state partisan here testifying against this bill.
Yeah. Well, I bet his plane back did have chemtrails, so.
Probably, you think he might have dumped some out on his way out,
He
out of the
probably did. He
state?
probably did. All right, let's move over, Chris, to what happened in House and Governmental Affairs on Tuesday. We had Senator Sebaw's constitutional amendment that would prohibit foreign donations in elections. We expected it to be heard on Tuesday. It wasn't heard. I guess they didn't have time for it, so they bumped it to probably next week.
Yeah, it should go next week, Senate Governmental Affairs, right, Danielle? Next
Yeah.
week. And, as we've talked about before, the bill really does clean up Representative Miguez's former legislation. And this bill just categorically prohibits foreign money in our elections on
Yeah.
the state level, including ballot propositions or constitutional amendments. The
Beautiful.
only thing that it doesn't do, if you have a bill whose purpose is to protect your elections from foreign interference and foreign corruption,
Yeah.
why would you not have a provision in there to prohibit the purchase of computer voting systems
Seems
until
like.
at least President Trump's executive order is fully consummated,
Yeah.
where the report's done about how vulnerable these computers are. But that's not in there. And
Yeah.
I will have an opportunity, hopefully, when I testify in favor of this legislation. I don't know whether to do a green card or a white card, but the bottom line is we do support the legislation, this constitutional amendment, but we're going to strongly encourage that a provision be added to it to prohibit the acquisition of these computer voting machines.
Yeah. Yeah. And Chris, one thing that we see a lot of around issues like this is we see like a busload of Chinese people getting dropped off at the Capitol to come and testify in opposition to it, or at least show up in the room and show, and put in red cards or something. Is there any reason that we would want somebody to bring legislation that some way limits foreign testimony in our capital, or at least like a resolution that says, yeah, you can come and testify, we want to hear all sides, but the preference and the deference goes to the citizens of the state. The deference will not go to foreign entities or
I
foreign
think that
people.
that is I think that is fair. Uh, I don't think that's going to happen. But
Maybe
to
not in
the
this environment.
maybe not in this environment, but to the extent that people are there to testify for or against a bill, I think at least facially they feel like they have an obligation to allow everyone to speak, while they're there. But yeah,
It's facially, it seems that way, but we got on our State of Freedom Facebook page this week a note from a woman who said that there were 3 female firefighters from Vernon Parish who showed up to House Municipal Affairs this week to testify, and they were not allowed to testify. And I just, how I feel about House Municipal Affairs Committee. It is uh, a bunion. I can't, it's a blight on our state governance that even exists.
it is, Danielle, because this is a committee whose primary purpose is to tell local governments and local jurisdictions what they can and cannot do.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't quite understand that. If you're a legislative body, what you do, if you have the constitutional authority to do it, should apply statewide, or you
Yeah.
don't have the constitutional authority to do it. But
It's
for
the
you,
detention teacher of local governance.
yes, exactly. So I agree with you 100%. And I know that you want to abolish entirely the House Committee on
Yes.
Local and Municipal Affairs. And I think I'm on board with you there because they're always dictating to these local jurisdictions what they can and can't do, and having the local jurisdictions beg Baton Rouge for money.
Yeah. And when we had Representative Guyman on, he chairs the House Natural Resources, and he committed that they would go through the night if they needed to. So every single person that came from somewhere across the state to testify on the bill, whether for, or, on the bills, whether for or against, would have the opportunity to be heard. So I find it very, very disgusting and alarming that the same would not be happening in House Municipal Affairs of all places when the people from the localities want to be heard on the topics.
Yeah, and I think it's despicable. That is really that committee has, on a number of bills that come to mind that we won't talk about now. That
Yeah.
that committee has just done some things, that are just inefficient, reflective of a lack of understanding of procedure, and really, it's just a circus in there,
Yeah.
And but as a matter of principle, Danielle, we don't need that committee in this state.
Period. Period. Send the money and send the issues back to where they came from. And the
Exactly. But you
people
know
can,
what that would involve, Danielle? That
that
would
would involve,
involve the
devolution
relinquishment
of power.
of power.
That's right. All right. Speaking of power, House Administration of Criminal Justice also met on Tuesday, and Representative Denise Marcel's House Bill 457, her solitary confinement bill, was heard. And it looked, Chris, like she got our amendment in there, which is exciting. You can talk a little bit more about that. And I believe how did that bill do? I didn't put it in my notes.
It did well. Passed out of committee, and it is and with the amendment that we had suggested on allowing religious materials to an inmate who was in solitary confinement. That it originally included only educational materials, but now specifically because of our request, it will include religious materials for someone who's in solitary confinement. So, we believe in accountability, we believe in the rule of law, but we also believe in being humane, and that's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just looked it up and it passed 8-0. So,
Yeah.
and that amendment made it in there. So awesome news on that one.
So
Happy
that
to
goes
pass
now
some good news
to,
along.
yeah, so that now goes to the House floor.
Yeah. And there were a couple things that were scheduled for House final passage this past Tuesday, Chris. One of them was House Bill 75 by Representative Danny McCormick. And you can talk a little bit about what that bill would have done.
Yeah, this bill, Danielle, would have simply ensured that property owners who do not voluntarily surrender their property for carbon capture sequestration pipelines, in other words, they hold out, and ultimately they're forced into the unit of affected property owners, that their compensation for having to surrender their property will not only not be penalized, they will not be penalized for that, but they will get at least the average compensation that every other property owner will get for having to surrender use of their property. It was a very, very fair bill. It would have protected, to the degree they're willing to do it now, private property rights, and yet that bill failed on the House floor.
And you know what's disgusting, Chris? This is a punishment of people who are standing for their constitutional rights. So what they're saying is, unless you go along with the scam, unless you let us shove this down your throat, you're not going to get anything.
Yeah,
Don't expect to get anything from us. We'll just take your property and you get what you get. And I think, Chris, the people who voted against this need to be called out. I don't know if you want to call them out or if you want me to call them
I'm
out.
happy to do it.
Why don't you go
Danielle,
for it?
the final vote on this, was this 54 to 46? Can you see what the
My count says 37-61, which is even more atrocious.
Okay, 37 to 61. And here are the Republicans who voted against a bill that simply would have made sure that a private property owner who's forced into an expropriation situation uh, gets at least the same average compensation for surrendering his property that anybody else would get, uh, simply for asserting his private property rights.
Yeah.
De Villiers, Bacala, Bamberg, Bayham, Boyer, Baralt, Davis, Domingue, familiar name, Eccles, Fontenot, Freiberg, Gadberry, Lacombe, McFarland, McMahon, McMakin, Reiser, Schlegel, Spell, St. Blanc, Thomas, Turner, Villio, Wiley, Weibel, and Zerang. Those were the Republicans who opposed this legislation. And I was very inspired by Representative Chuck Owen's remarks on this bill on the House floor. He really spoke exactly the way citizens across Louisiana feel about this issue. And it's just becoming increasingly important that we let voters know exactly how these Republicans have voted on these issues.
Yeah. I'm just stunned, Chris. I'm stunned because it just shows to me, this is a lot like the way we've seen the gold and silver bill operate, where it doesn't even matter how reasonable of an argument you make. It doesn't even matter how much concessions you give, right? Because the concession here is, let's say that eminent domain continues and someone takes your property and you don't want them to. What is your legal recourse? In a state that loves lawsuits, you would think, in a state that says that we're doing this for the public interest or we're doing this to create jobs. Well, who cares if you create jobs? Why can't you at least, at a bare minimum, give the people whose property was stolen from them an equitable value? It's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. And I hope that none of these people get reelected.
Yeah.
Period. And
Yeah.
you know what? I just want to point out one more time The Speaker did not have to vote on this. The Speaker does not have to lodge a vote, but he has consistently voted against property rights this session, and I
Yeah.
think that bears mention.
And his vote wouldn't have made a difference.
No, yeah, exactly right. It's not like it was the tiebreaker.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. All right. Well, next up is a pretty interesting one, Chris, that I think you'll probably enjoy talking about. House Bill 160, Representative Kelly Dickerson's ethics complaints bill, where basically it's a due process bill, you said, and it's also got some whistleblower protection in there. It passed the House floor 88-7, with the only Republican voting against it being Jessica Domingue.
Yeah.
22 Democrats joined in support. So 22 Democrats crossed over and supported a transparency bill. But
Yeah.
my representative, Jessica Domingue, voted against it.
So every Republican who voted on HB 160 on the House floor voted in favor of it, a
Yeah.
bill that simply says that at some point during an ethics investigation with the state ethics board, the accused has a right to know the identity of the person who is accusing him. Seems like a fundamental due process issue and an issue of basic fairness. So the bill would have provided that, and it also provides because of some conversations that we had with the author, Representative Dickerson, and other people talked to her about this, some very strong anti-retaliation language in the bill, which prevents someone who's accused from taking any retaliatory action against a complainant. And that's very, very important because sometimes very powerful people have meritorious complaints filed against them, and we don't want to chill or discourage people filing meritorious complaints. And so the bill would have done both of those two things. It's a well-written bill. It's a good bill as reflected by the vote, Danielle. And yet your representative, Jessica Domingue, the Republican, stood out and thought it was appropriate to vote against that legislation.
Yeah. And if I recall correctly, Chris, and we may have mentioned this on the last show, but when I believe it was maybe Chuck Owen who brought this legislation last year, or I think it was Chuck Owen, she voted against it and it was killed in committee.
Yep, it sure was. It sure was.
Hysterical.
And so she voted against it last year. So fortunately, so now it will go on to the Senate committee and hopefully on to final passage.
Yeah. All right. But no thanks to Jessica Domingue.
No thanks to Jessica.
All right. Well, next up, House Bill 405, a great bill being brought by Democrat Representative Matthew Willard, and it requires the Secretary of State to prepare and publish information changes in the election law and how that's going to be rolled out by her office. It passed 96-0, which is pretty stunning. So to me, there must not be enough in there that's objectionable to Secretary Landry. I think that's my read on it.
I think you're right. The bill at this point requires her to post and provide public updates about legislative changes in law regarding elections or election procedures. And that is important. And it is important, and it shouldn't be controversial. One thing that you and I have discussed when this goes before Senator Klein Peters' Senate Governmental Affairs Committee is advocating before that committee that there be a specific provision in the bill be amended to require the Secretary of State to provide specific updates and all appropriate notices with regard to the procurement process in getting our new voting system, because that is a big concern to people in Louisiana. Many people have felt left out of the process. She wants to buy $100 million worth of computer voting systems. And people don't really know where she is in the procurement process. People don't know how to provide public input and that sort of thing. And so hopefully we get the bill amended that will require her to be fully transparent in the procurement process for this new voting system that she wants.
Yeah. Chris, as a matter of where we are in the process, do you think that's already law and it's just not being followed?
To be honest with you, I don't know. It could be, but I certainly don't think it could hurt to codify it within the parameters of this bill. Because, I testified on another bill yesterday that we'll talk about, Danielle, and I said, look, a lot of people feel very left out of this process.
Yeah.
You know,
You did a good job on that one.
well, I appreciate you saying that. So we're going to reach out to Senator McGaz and Senator Klein-Peter and see about getting an amendment on that bill specifically relating to transparency in the procurement process
Beautiful. And don't forget about fair notice for hearings.
and fair notice and hearing and transparency. Yeah.
Okay. Next up, these were a couple bills that should have gone to the Senate for final passage this week. Some of them did, some of them didn't. SB 80, Senator Greg Miller's exit poll censorship bill.
That
As of
has been still pending for final vote on the House floor, right?
yeah,
Yeah, on the House floor.
on the House floor. Sorry.
Yeah, and this is the bill that would unconstitutionally restrict law-abiding citizens from conducting lawful exit polls. And we're the only state in the country, if this passes, that would distinguish between bona fide journalists and law-abiding citizens when it comes to who has the right to conduct exit polls. I don't know why they keep delaying the vote in the House on this bill, Danielle,
I
because
hope
it's
it's
been
because we're
scheduled.
flooding the zone.
But I know we have a call to action out on it. I spoke with Beryl Amade about it yesterday very briefly, and she believes that this bill should be killed. I know she certainly opposes it, and I sent a lot of communiques to different. When I thought it was going to be voted on yesterday, I sent some communications to a number of reps urging them to vote against this bill, SB 80. It's a horrendous piece of legislation that's being pushed once again by our Secretary of State, Nancy Landry.
And this is in basically the 11th hour posture, right? But there's nothing to say that it can't be defeated here. If you recall, I know you do, Mike Bayham's gallant speech against the cockroach bill, the bill that would have infringed on our right to talk on a handheld cell phone device in our car. His speech killed that so decisively, so powerfully last year that I'm hoping, Chris, maybe we should be figuring out who would be the appropriate person to stand up and give a great speech on why censorship is not welcome in the state of Louisiana.
Absolutely, and believe me, we're going to be working on it, and because it really is a bill that it's not about what people are doing. It's not about the nature of the activity that the Secretary of State's against, Danielle. It's about the nature of the information that they're going to be deriving when they do these exit polls. And she doesn't want that. She doesn't want any opportunity to question the validity of a computer or machine-based voting system. And that's what this ultimately comes down to.
And I don't think there's any reason the Democrats can't come over on this one.
I don't either, and that's something that we can talk to the Democrats about. Speaking, Danielle, of the of Mike Bayham and the cell phone bill.
Yeah.
That HB, I think it's 519 by Representative Glorioso, is still, it passed the House, but it's still pending before the Senate Transportation Committee.
That's beautiful.
So it hasn't.
Who's the committee chair for that?
I don't know who the chairman is for the Senate Transportation. Yeah, but it's interesting that this.
I hope it pens until it can pend no longer.
Yeah. I love it.
You know what? It's Patrick Connick.
Yeah. Well, Patrick Connick. That's not necessarily a good sign because Patrick Connick is the one who brought the cockroach bill, the cell phone bill, last year.
Did he?
Yeah, or maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But
last year it was McMath.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was confused. Connick and McMath. No, so it was McMath. So Connick, no, he's not involved in this. So look, Connick may he may look at this and say, you know what, this is overreach. So the point is, and I can reach out to Senator Connick on this, but this bill, Danielle, it passed in the House. Sorry for this. 71-28 in the House, the cell phone bill on May 6th. May 6th. And it's still apparently not been scheduled for hearing in the Senate Transportation Committee. So maybe
Well,
that's a good sign.
look, there's a lot more important things that Senate Transportation needs to be doing, namely getting these the contract legislation worked out, and the total revamp of DOTD. Those are far more important for Senate Transport to be listening to than this garbage.
Than this garbage where you're going to criminalize someone from talking on a handheld cell phone. So
Yeah,
anyway, yeah, I think it's a good sign. I thought it was worth
cool.
noting when you mentioned Mike
Beautiful.
Behan.
Yeah, thanks. All right, next up, Senate Bill 117. That's Senator Blake Miguez's ultra processed food ban, getting it out of the schools. It hasn't been voted on yet. So
It hasn't been voted yet on the
in the House floor, I
on the
guess.
House. Yeah, so it passed the Senate, hasn't been voted yet on the House floor. Do you anticipate any problem with this getting this garbage and this dye out of our students' diets?
No, there's just 2 or 3 Democrats and Barbara Freiberg that don't want it.
Yeah. 2 or 3 Democrats in Freiburg. Yeah, that's going to be a good quote one day. But yeah, I think it's a very good bill, and it's really a complementary bill to McMath's SB 14,
Yeah.
that his nutrition bill, and it's very important.
Yeah, and Chris, I was even wondering if they were holding this back because McMath's seems to be a bit more robust and it's making its way through without too much headwind. So I'm wondering if they'll just let that one scoot ahead of this one.
They may well be doing that because the bills are very similar.
Yeah. All right, Chris. Senate Bill 39 by Senator Jay Morris. This is his false imprisonment bill to say that the state won't be liable if they continue to hold prisoners past their out date. And you said that it passed. It passed on a party line vote with Jimmy Harris and Jay Luno joining the Republicans in voting the wrong way for it. By the way, a yes is a wrong vote on this one, and it will be sent over to the House to go to committee next week.
Yeah, SB 39 going to be going over to either House Judiciary, maybe House Governmental Affairs. But the bill, Danielle, is not nearly as ominous as it once was at the beginning in its original form. It's just not needed anymore. It's a terrible
Yeah.
bill, and it does have to do with liability by the state for over detaining inmates whose time has been served. They should be getting out. Look, just get your systems in order. As I said before, the Department of Corrections in Louisiana has a $1.2 billion budget. Calculate the outdates properly, and you won't get sued for it.
That's right. Chris, when these bills get sent over to the Senate, and we know they're Senate Jude, we call it, but Senate Judiciary A, B, and C. Do you know, is there any reason other than scheduling that one committee would get a bill like this versus another? Are they topical, or A, B, and C assigned topically, or is it just the pleasure of the chair and the pleasure of the Senate president?
I think it's the pleasure of the chair, the pleasure of the Senate president, and probably also the author of the bill may have some influence over which judiciary committee it goes before. But in the case of SB 39, Senate Bill 39, Jay Morris, that now is going over to the House side.
That's right.
And they only have one House Governmental Affairs Committee. And so that's probably where it's going to go, unless it goes to the judiciary, which it might go on the House side. But the point is, this bill is terrible. Still terrible, not as terrible.
The point after all our rambling is the bill is terrible.
Right.
They should vote no.
They should vote no because it's not needed. But thank God it's not as bad as it was.
Yeah, and we were supposed to have someone, Caroline. Oh darn, I can't recall her last name. Gabriel from William Most's law firm speak on this with us on Tuesday. Due to an administrative error on my part, she wasn't able to join, but we may get someone from their firm to come and talk to us next week if this looks like it's still in play.
Yeah, and get their thoughts on the new iteration of the bill. Yeah. I don't think they're as alarmed as they were at the beginning. By the way, Danielle, I testified against this legislation before Senate Jude A.
That's right. That's right. Okay, Chris, Senate Bill 214. This one stinks to high heaven by Senator Royce Duplessis. And this one would make the Commissioner of Insurance appointed by the governor,
Yeah, Senator Royce Duplessis, the
carrying the
leftist,
governor's water.
the leftist among the left
Yeah,
in the state senate, would, as you said, would make the commissioner of insurance in Louisiana appointed by the governor, and chosen from a list of nominees submitted to him by various heads of legislative heads and agency heads. And so Thomas Presley stood strong against this on the Senate floor, as well as Senator Adam Bass and Senator Kirk Talbot. But Senator Presley was particularly impressive because he just asked a very simple question on the floor to Duplessis. He said, "Who gets more power from this bill? Who gets more power?" And obviously, Duplessis tried to weave around it and avoid the answering it straightforward. But it's obvious that the governor gets more power from this
that's right.
bill. And we live in an elected democracy, and there's no reason why the commissioner of insurance should be an appointed position in our state. He should be elected and accounted to the people just like everybody else. So the bottom line is SB 214. Duplessis was so badgered on it by those two or three senators that it was returned to the calendar and not voted on, because I'm sure Duplessis realized that he didn't have the votes for it. So I don't
That's
know
so
what's going to
beautiful.
happen with 214, if it's going to come back up or whether it is as good as dead at this point. It should be.
It should be dead. And, when Carla was talking with us earlier about their public service commission, their equivalent of the public service commission being elected instead of appointed, and the power that held, I know I started smiling. I saw you were grinning as well, because that's the exact point. These people need to be accountable to us, not to the governor, because it has been proven that the governor does not believe he is accountable to us.
Exactly. And we don't have any reason really to believe, unfortunately, that any future governor will be.
Yeah,
Hopefully they will be. Hopefully we will get a governor next time that does understand the Constitution and understands the importance of oversight. But this really doesn't apply just to Landry, this particular bill. I
correct.
don't think any governor should be appointing any statewide elected official in our state. They should
Well,
all be directly accountable to the people.
100%. And Chris, I think it's probably oh, did I lost my brilliant thought there. Mm,
Just
let's
think,
see.
214. But that's exactly what came into my head, Danielle, when Carla was talking about the appointed position, utilities
Yeah.
positions in the other states. I was thinking of 214.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Now, carrying on, Chris, unless my other thought recirculates, which it very well may at some point. Senate Bill 216 by Senator Valerie Hodges. This is her bill that would tighten up contracting with DOTD, create some incentives, some disincentives, try and create some efficiencies. It passed the Senate floor unanimously. So there's
Yeah.
something there are a handful of things that everyone can agree on.
And DOTD's inefficiency in completing state road projects and the waste of money and the unnecessary delays, that's something I think everybody can agree on. And this bill addresses those issues. So
Yeah.
fortunately, it passed. It will go on to the House committee now, and it should get through.
Yeah. Okay. And her other bill, Chris, her Senate Bill 226, the one that got gutted and they treated her so mercilessly terrible on the Senate floor and in Senate Judiciary A committee, it hasn't been called back up,
It
right?
hasn't been called back up yet. You know, that bill was, as you know, gutted significantly, and it's not been called back up on the Senate floor since she tried to present it a few days ago. So I don't know what's going to happen to the bill in its current form, Danielle. I don't really know what it accomplishes at this point, but we'll see. And there's still a faint hope that some of the provisions in her original bill could be returned on the Senate floor. Certainly, it's something to hope for. I'm not particularly optimistic about it at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Now over to what happened in Senate and Governmental Affairs this week, Chris. This one, I don't know if you've heard back from anyone. I know you were putting some questions out to a few folks because we were unclear on how or why this vote went down the way it did. House Bill 216 by Representative Steve Jackson seemed to be just simply a transparency bill about the recording of meetings on the Board of Ethics, which we're supportive of. However, it passed, but some really great conservatives that we have a lot of respect for voted against it, which raised some flags for us as to why the bill got, why they voted against it, that something else must have got shoved in there that we missed.
This was on the House floor, correct?
It was, exactly, on the House floor. It passed 87-13, and like I said, there were a lot of great conservatives voting against it, including.
And Beryl Amade's position on it, and this is
Mhm.
interesting because she did respond.
Okay.
Her position was ethics hearings are not the same as legislative hearings where the public needs as much input as possible in the lawmaking process. She said this was our main concern, that by mandating live broadcasts and accessible archives of public meetings could be used to bring raw investigative material and accusations to light before they've been investigated for
Oh,
the
so if there's a
purpose.
criminal matter, then and it
Yeah.
goes to the ethics committee first, then it would kind of violate some of their
Yeah.
privacy.
For the
Okay.
purpose of acquiring video of smears and accusations, not a good idea as written. In other words, I think her concern is that the investigative process itself, while the ethics board is having hearings and discussions to determine whether or not they need to bring charges against somebody, that that should not be broadcast to the public.
Because it would usurp their due process, I guess, in a way.
Exactly, because they're just considering and baseless allegations and accusations and smears could be accessed by the public in that situation and used to defame people in situations where the ethics board may ultimately decide there's nothing here. We don't
Yeah.
need to be bringing charges on this. And so why should the public be aware of that? And I do understand that. I think there's a privacy issue there. So, but I think that if the bill could be amended, that require, that says at a certain point, the meetings should be broadcast to the public. Maybe the decision, if they have a decision, why they made the decision, that meeting should be aired to the public, things like that. But I do agree here, Danielle, that a blanket transparency bill at every stage of an ethics case
Investigation,
even pre-charging, I understand the privacy concerns there.
Yeah, because if some of those videos get out and into the court of public opinion before they get into the court of law, that causes a lot of problems
A lot of
for the
problems.
defendant, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like Ray Donovan said, when he went to a jury trial and was acquitted on all counts after scurrilous accusations to be made against him, he said, "Well, thank you for acquitting. Now, where do I go to get my reputation back?"
Yeah,
So I think
exactly.
maybe that's what Representative Amade's concern is here.
Yeah. I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at danielle@freedomstate.us for more information. Okay, Chris, House Bill 577 by Rep. Daryl Desitel. We hate this one. It's the one that would give Secretary Landry carte blanche to get whatever machines she wants at whatever cost, it seems, and directly procure instead of speaking or involving the public in any way, form, or doing the competitive bidding. And you can add to that. But it was reported favorably from Senate and Governmental Affairs. So last stop is next stop, which is the Senate floor.
The Senate floor, yeah. This was very interesting. There was some very strong testimony in Senate Governmental Affairs yesterday, Danielle, against this bill, and it was a real privilege to testify against it. And even though the bill got out of committee, Nancy Landry, on the record, because of questions, direct questions from Senator Miguez, made some very significant concessions. I mean, she stated on the record yesterday that no component parts and no voting computers at all will be acquired from any foreign country, not just foreign adversary, but any foreign country. And she acknowledged that. She also agreed with Senator Miguez to have direct communications between the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee, the chairman, and even Senator Miguez, her office, and the Trump administration regarding this procurement process and President Trump's EOs. Because as you know, Danielle, Secretary Landry has been representing repeatedly over the last couple of weeks that the Trump administration is fully on board with her investing $100 million in a computer-based voting system, despite the existence of an executive order right now that's ordering a full audit and investigation into all electronic voting systems in the country. So we find that difficult to believe. She says she has a letter from the Trump administration that's telling her, go ahead, do what you got to do, proceed, you have our blessing. But we haven't seen that letter. We don't know what it says. And certainly we have a hard time believing that the Trump administration has unconditionally endorsed her taking an action that directly contradicts what Trump has repeatedly said about electronic voting, what Tulsi Gabbard has said, what Elon Musk has said, and what all the cyber experts know. So the bottom line is they're going to set up calls where Senator Miguez and members of the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee can be on the call with members of the Trump administration and the Secretary of State to clarify these issues. That I don't think she was happy about that.
But I love it. I absolutely love it. Thank you, Senator Miguez, for
Yeah.
that. I really appreciate it because I just feel that her position is misrepresenting reality. That's
I think it is too. And the final concession that she made, she admitted in her testimony yesterday that because Senator Miguez asked her directly, at what point during the procurement process under this bill, will the public be able to have input on this and be able to address the issues that concern them regarding this process? And she said, I really don't know the answer to that. You'll have to ask the Division of Administration, DOA. So she didn't even know at what point the public will be able to have input in the process and how the public can participate in this procurement process. So at that point, Senator Miguez insisted to her, and she agreed to it, that there will be well-advertised opportunities for the public to participate in this process, express our opinions regarding her decision and the status of the process. So that's another concession that she made yesterday on the record. So while the bill passed out, and we'll go to the Senate, and also, Danielle, there's a chance that this could still be killed on the Senate floor.
Yeah.
So
did Senator Miguez and others vote against it in committee, or did they vote for it?
What happened was Senator Miguez made a motion to delay the vote on this because of all the testimony in there. He made a motion to delay the vote. That motion was defeated 2-4. All the Democrats voted against it, and Senator Greg Miller voted against it. He's on the committee. He's been carrying Nancy Landry's water the entire session. So he voted against it. So 3 Democrats and Miller, the Republican Miller, voted against delaying the vote on it. Senator Miguez and Senator Facey both voted to delay it. So those are the 2 votes. And there were 2 Republicans who were not in the room, Senator Reese and Senator Womack. If they had been in there and voted on it, then it would have been a 4-4 tie. The motion still wouldn't have carried because you have to have a majority to carry it. But it's interesting that those 2 Republicans were not in the room, and I believe they were there for the roll call.
But if they had been there and they had voted for it, then that would have forced the issue to Senator Klein-Peter, who chairs the committee, correct?
Absolutely.
So there was a chance.
There was a chance if they had been in there. But certainly the fact that they were absent for that vote suggests that they are hearing from the citizens on this issue,
Yeah.
and they, rather than vote against that motion, they would just, rather they think it's better just to be absent than to affirmatively vote no on something. And I
But they're
think
wrong.
but they're wrong. And I think it does have to do with all the communications that have gone to that committee over the last couple of weeks on that bill,
Yeah.
hundreds of them from us. From our call to action and from others, and Senator Miguez specifically mentioned all the communications that he's received on this. So the calls to
Beautiful.
action really are working.
They are. They absolutely are. And a big thank you to Senator Miguez and Senator Facey for standing for the people and standing for the voice of the people and the right for us to have a say in the process.
And Senator Klein Peter, because at the end, Senator Klein Peter, the chairman, said that I want everybody to know here, and I hear the testimony here, and I appreciate your being here, and I want everybody to know that I am committed as chairman of this committee to full and complete transparency in this process. So they are hearing us.
Well, great. Great. Well, perhaps Senator Miguez will give a rousing speech on the Senate floor and kill it once and for all.
Absolutely could happen.
Okay. Now, okay. So also let's see this. I'm trying to get my wits about me here. Senator Patrick McMath's SB 14 passed House Health and Welfare this week on Wednesday, 12-0. And so it's headed now to the House floor.
Headed to the House floor. And I think, Danielle, not to preempt you here, I believe that because of McMath's bill, which is a really big bill, which received national attention, and as you said, it's a very broad-based nutrition bill for our students to get all the garbage out of the food that they consume. That took up a lot of time in the House Health and Welfare Committee, which is the reason why Senator Facey's SB 2, I believe that's his fluoride bill.
Yeah.
And then SB 19, his ivermectin over-the-counter bill, were delayed in House Health and Welfare. And he believes that both of those two important bills will be scheduled for one day next week in House Health and Welfare, probably Tuesday. But that ivermectin bill, Danielle, imagine the number of people who could have been saved during COVID if they had had ready access over-the-counter to ivermectin.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there wasn't the censorship.
Well, exactly. And the retaliation.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a lot there, but this certainly would have gone a long way because I know that there were plenty of people who wanted it. And even if they could find a doctor who would write it for them, the big box pharmacies wouldn't fill it.
Well, exactly. There's no question about it. So this legislation is really, really important. And I have to give reiterate my shout out to Dr. Ralph Abrams, who is the Surgeon General, who testified very effectively. I know he testified next to Senator Facey in favor of the ivermectin bill, and I believe he also testified on the fluoride bill. But I know he testified on ivermectin. So Dr. Abraham is strongly in support of getting ivermectin to citizens over the counter without any bureaucratic red tape.
Yeah, and whether he testified in favor of Senator Facey's ban on fluoride or not, he did weigh in on Twitter. I saw that, and he said, the science is out. Basically, the science is there, and we have a choice to make. What do we value more, IQ points or teeth?
Is that what he said?
Yeah. And I think he's right. I think he's absolutely right. There are other ways to protect your teeth. So, and you can protect your teeth on your own time.
Destroy what a t-shirt say, destroy your gut, protect your teeth.
Terrible. All right. Okay, Chris, there's a couple other bills we want to talk about. One is one that's been at the center of a lot of our conversation today, which is, or at least I guess, it has been House Bill 601 by Representative Brett Guyman, and this would be dealing with eminent domain rules for carbon dioxide.
We believe that bill will come back for a vote on the floor next week. There are some iterations that are being worked on with that, and we still have our call to action up on it. We feel cautiously optimistic that there's going to be a good result on that one way or the other on 601.
Yeah, So I'm sure he's still drumming up support for it. So the more that you can reach out to your representative and pile up their inbox and let them know that you're watching their vote, that the better off we're going to be on this one.
And please go to lacag.org and do the call to action. Do all the calls to action while you're up there, but specifically on this bill, it's HB 601.
Yeah, I'll put that up there for people. lacag.org/action-center. But just go to lacag.org and you can see the action button.
A lot of action.
A lot of action. Speaking of action, early next week, we expect House Bill 386 by Representative Raymond Cruz. This is his gold and silver as legal currency, not just legal tender, but legal currency bill. It did pass, and I think we may have mentioned that on Tuesday, Chris, because I think it passed out of House and Governmental Affairs or Commerce, probably House Commerce on Monday. So I think we would have reported on that on Tuesday, but it's
7
heading
to
to the
6.
House floor. Yeah,
7 to 6 vote. And Dixon McMakin, to his credit, switched his vote from the first time the bill went before the committee to a yes vote. And Representative Domingue and Hebert and a number of other Republicans still voted no on it. But this is going to the House floor for a vote. And Representative Cruz has asked LACAG to do a floor note on this because he believes that big bankers are going to be in there against this legislation doing floor notes opposed. So we're going to do a strong floor note in favor of HB 386. And I'll encourage, we need to adjust the call to action on that one, Danielle, to go to the House floor, but we have a call to action for HB 386. So go on there later today, please, and do that call to action at lacag.org in favor of HB 386 to make gold and silver recognized as transactional currency in the state of Louisiana. Really important bill.
Yeah, it's a citizens' rights bill. I mean, really, it's a free speech bill if you think about it. How you pay is a matter of free speech in a way. And Chris, I think the fact that the bankers are still lining up against this, the people on that committee, the representatives on that committee who refused to change their vote despite Representative Cruz's concessions, just goes to show that the arguments against this were completely disingenuous. And really what it's about is not wanting the people to have the choice and the freedom to pay the way they want to pay.
Yeah. And it's about economic liberty.
Yeah.
This is about choice and economic liberty is the bottom line. Yeah. So, Representative Cruz, like I said, specifically called me 2 or 3 days ago and asked us to do a floor note on this because he expects opposition on the House floor.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you'll be there. And then last up on my list, Chris, is House Bill 400 by Representative Emily Chenevert. I believe you said this one is set for floor debate on May 27th. This is her parental rights bill where parents get to regain control of their kids' medical decisions.
Yes, and this shouldn't be controversial at this point, Danielle. It just should not be.
And it hasn't been so far, thankfully.
Yeah. So
with the exception, I guess they paused it for some work around a couple of issues, but those seem to have gotten worked out.
Yeah, they seem to have gotten worked out. There was an issue related to abusive situations and whether or not, how you provide in a situation where a minor is being abused by his parents or his legal guardians, and yet he has to disclose to them that he's going to seek some help for their abuse. And so the bill had to provide for that exception and some other things. But this bill should pass, Danielle, because parents and guardians have a right to know what is going on with their minors when they're considering seeking medical care or medical treatment. It seems like a no-brainer. So I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on HB 400 to see if there are any Republicans who vote against this bill on the House floor. This is too important to play around with.
Yeah, it is. And Chris, we're really getting into crunch time now. We are headed into the last 3 weeks of session next week, and then we have 2 more weeks. So I believe that we should be expecting things that start looking like they're getting hung up in one house or, in the House or in the Senate. We need to really be pushing hard on because, if we want to see them move forward, because this is the time that bills start dying. Good bills die in this period of time.
Yeah, and there's one other bill, Danielle, that I wanted to mention to
Yeah.
you that we haven't even talked about, but it's HB 585. And it is a bill that simply would require landowners to be given advance notice to anybody who has an interest in their property about if somebody's planning on using their property for carbon capture sequestration. Prior to engaging in those activities, they have to give the landowner and any person who has a vested interest in the property advance notice of what they are planning to do.
Hmm.
That's what the bill would have done. HB 585. The bill passed in the House 68-24, but there
Okay.
were 17 Republicans who voted against even that provision. And
That's
Jessica Domain
disgusting.
was one of them.
I'm
HB
sure.
585, and I don't have it pulled up right now, but it's
Here, I
important.
can pull it up.
HB 585.
Let me
So,
pull it up real quick. And Chris, the other one I was hoping you would talk about is the two bills you referenced on social media yesterday, giving Representative Mandy Landry a shout out, which is a very rare occurrence. So, would you mention what her bill would do that you were applauding yesterday?
yes, Representative Landry authored a bill so many times in the criminal process, Danielle, when a case is being prosecuted, serious cases, things happen in that case, plea deals are discussed, cases are continued, discovery decisions are made about what can be introduced as evidence or what not, just the whole procedural posture of a case. And the victims and the victims' families in many of these serious felony cases are left in the dark about
Yeah.
what is going on with their case. And it deeply affects them. And these families have often been traumatized by these criminal acts. And right now, they often do not know what is going on with those cases. And so Representative Landry's bill requires electronic publication of every development in criminal cases to the victims' families, and even to the public, because they'll be publicly accessible. And I think that's really important, particularly, obviously, if you're a victim or a victim's family in these
Yeah.
cases, you have a right to know what's going on. You're the one who will be living with the effects of this criminality for the rest of your life. You have a right to know how it's being prosecuted and what the posture of the case is. And interestingly enough, Danielle, Representative Villio, who is not often aligned with Representative Landry, added an amendment to the bill on the floor that would also require uh, public notice anytime there's a prison escape. Because you know what happened in New Orleans? There
Yeah.
were 9 or 10 hardened criminals who escaped prison in New Orleans. It took, it was 10 hours passed before anybody, the media, the public, anybody was notified that you have 10 hardened criminals running around on the streets that just broke out of prison. Did you know that?
I only know it because I saw that on your post last night, but thank you, Representative Villio. That's an important addition, apparently, that shouldn't be. I mean, we shouldn't need to tell them that they need to tell the public. Obvious, it should be. I mean, it's kind of like a reverse 911, right? The prisoners escaped. Call everyone.
I mean, I think it's maybe there's some who knows, Democrat legislators, who knows, who just think that the public should be notified by the escapees.
Yeah, maybe so. When they come banging on your
When
door.
they come
Yeah.
in, we're out of prison now.
Yeah.
We want to come to your house next.
Hmm.
So we just want to let you know that we're out. Maybe that's the deal. So that's good. Congratulations to
Yeah.
Representative Landry and Representative Villio for including that amendment on the bill. And one other one, HB 64
Okay.
by Representative Mike Johnson. His bill that will clarify and codify the authority of the Attorney General and the
That's right.
Governor to negate or reject any agreements between any local government or any municipality with the federal government that centers on or implicates our sovereign rights as a state under the 10th Amendment.
Yeah.
The Attorney General and the Governor have plenary authority to reject those agreements, and the parties to those agreements have to advise the Attorney General and the Governor about the nature of those agreements so that a decision can be made. This is just a very good bill on sovereignty, and it reasserts our absolute right to basically nullify any agreement that violates our 10th Amendment rights of state sovereignty. So Representative Mike Johnson's a very good bill, and Attorney General Murrell was behind that legislation as well. It's a good bill. So shout out to Attorney General Murrell and Representative Mike Johnson.
Yeah. And Chris, maybe just going back now to House Bill 585, I believe you said, by Representative McCormick, the bill that would provide advance notice to any landowner who's in the crosshairs of CCS.
Yeah.
I can read to you those who voted against it, the Republicans. Let me say that it does start with the Speaker, yet again, voting when he did not need to weigh in on that. And then, I'm not necessarily going to remember who the Democrats and Republicans are in this, so I may just say them all. But Baralt, I believe that's Stephanie, huh? I'm pretty sure.
She's a Republican.
Beth Billings, Boyer, Davis, Domingue, Freeman, I believe she's a Democrat, Freiberg, Glorioso, Hilferty, Hughes, Ilg, Larvadane, Marcel, McMakin, Miller, Newell, Engeron, Schlegel, Spell, St. Blanc, Thomas, Villio, and Zerang. So a lot from the Bayou are represented in that space of not wanting to give you advance notice that your private property is even in the crosshairs of one of these scam artist companies.
Yeah, and a number of Democrats, Danielle, joined the Republicans in voting for this bill to provide basic notice to landowners when CCS projects are about to be on your property. Democrats who voted yes, as they should have. Adams, Boyd, Brass. Let's see, who else here? Chasson, Travis Johnson, LaFleur, Mandy Landry, Lyons, Representative Lyons, Knox, Willard, Young. So a number of Democrats voted in favor of this. And specifically, Danielle, since you named all the ones who voted against it, I just want to name the Republicans who voted against this on the floor. The Speaker, Baralt, Billings, Davis. Is Boyer a Republican?
I don't remember.
I don't know. Davis, Domain, Freiberg, Glorioso, Hilferty, Ilg, McMakin, Orgeron, Schlegel, Spell, St. Blanc, Thomas, Villio, and Zerang. Yeah. Republicans who voted against, 17 Republicans who voted against this bill to give this notice to landowners. It's important. I think frankly, it's despicable.
It is despicable, but the positive side is that the bill is advancing and it should be going over to the Senate. Senate Natural Resources next, I would imagine.
Yes, that's where it'll be going, and hopefully it passes through over there. And thank God for all the Republicans who supported this.
Yeah, absolutely, and the Democrats, much appreciation.
And the Democrats as well, exactly. When 10 Democrats who never vote with conservative Republicans come over and vote for a piece of legislation, I mean, what does that tell you about the Republicans who opposed it? It's almost like we've talked about before, Danielle. They don't want to give even the slightest concession to private property, to the rights of landowners. Not even the slightest concessions can be made. And that's why I think the ire of the citizens is up so much right now on this issue of CCS.
Because it begs the question, why won't you listen to us not even a tiny bit? Are you being paid? I mean, what is there in it for you that you refuse to listen to the people who put you in that position?
Exactly.
Anyway, time will tell.
Time will tell. And Danielle, I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anything else. Let's see, 6:15. House Bill 615. That's Representative Guyman's bill that would give local
Oh yeah,
authority.
the solar one.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember what happened with that HB 615. I think
I think you said, well, it failed in the House, on the House floor. Remember, he was supposed to try and bring it back, though.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And did we say how people voted on this?
Yeah, we did.
We did? Okay. All
I'm
right.
pretty
Just wanted to
sure.
make sure that we said how people voted on this. It failed final passage this is the one that failed 53 to 46.
Yeah, and there were some
53 for,
absences and stuff, so
yeah.
he was hoping to bring it back.
Yeah, and so hopefully he's going to bring it back. But a lot of Republicans voted against this bill
Yeah.
to provide authority for local governments to establish the parameters and the permitting process for these solar generation facilities. So once again, Republicans killed some basic legislation to give some autonomy to local governments on this Green New Deal garbage.
Yeah, which should already be the de facto stance.
Well, exactly. One day we're going to have to do a study, Danielle, that really compares line by line the campaign platforms of some of these Republicans when they're running for office versus their voting records after they get there. I think it would be an interesting study.
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting study. It's probably not a very complex one at that.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
All right, Chris. Well, I think that rounds us out for today. On Tuesday, we will be back at 8, letting you know what's coming for the week ahead. I expect the next 3 weeks to be fast and furious. Probably you do as well. Anything you're looking forward to next week that we haven't mentioned?
I'm looking forward to all of it. I'm looking forward. One of the things I'm looking forward to is the floor note that we're going to do on Representative Cruz' gold and silver bill, because even though it doesn't give us everything that we wanted in the original version of the bill, it's still a step in the right direction. And I think it will be habituating the state and the legislature to taking another step next year on it. But it's important that this pass. There's a reason why the bankers are opposed to this. And it's, again, the same reason we've always given, because they feel like they deserve to have the monopoly on how we conduct our economic activities.
Chris, it would be easy enough for us to figure out who testified from the Banking Association on behalf against this, right? And then also look it up on the Secretary of State's website, how much money the banks donated to campaigns and what campaigns they donated to, and see, if that's got anything to do with the intractable position of some of these representatives.
Louisiana Bankers Association. I know that that's the name of it, and I know that they've testified against it. And so, yeah, it should be relatively easy to find, relatively easy to follow the money.
It might be an interesting data point to put in your floor note.
Absolutely. That's a great thought. And also, before we go, Danielle, I want to encourage everyone, beginning at about 1 o'clock today, 12:30 or 1 today, to go to LACAG.org. We'll have the calls to action updated, the targeted recipients, and please do all those call to actions. There's about 8 of them up there now, 8 or 9. It takes about 2 minutes to do them. We encourage you to customize your own email if you want to, and do those calls to action, because I'm telling you, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And we are making sure, and I think the legislature is increasingly aware of the power of the voice of the people, and LACAG is a venue through that. So
Yeah.
thank you for being our voice down there, Chris. We really appreciate that, and I know.
And thank you for being on the State of Freedom, because Danielle, we're moving, expanding, and because people are sharing and people are listening to the State of Freedom, because they understand that they're not going to get the unvarnished truth in any other venue than
right.
ours, because we have no issue telling the truth, and that's very, very important. So continue to share and subscribe to State of Freedom. Go to lacag.org, and when you're doing your calls to action, join lacag.org, because it takes resources to continue to level the playing field. There are so many special interests down there at the legislature who are buying these legislators, the deep-pocketed lobbyists, And we are fighting only for ordinary, regular Louisiana citizens. So go join us and support us at LACAG.org and continue to share the state of freedom, because Danielle, we are making a difference. You
We
are
are.
right.
We are. Yeah. And they're not going to shut us down. They're not going to silence us. We're only going to get louder and louder. Mark my words, Chris. All right. Love you. Have a great day. Bye. We've all had instances crop up where we could use the advice or skills of a trusted attorney. Whether you're looking at the implications of new laws for your business, signing a contract or a lease, looking to write a will or establish a trust, or even resolve a dispute with your credit card company, Legal Shield has got you covered. For over 50 years, Legal Shield has made it affordable and easy to access a dedicated lawyer. With the app, Legal Shield is like having a lawyer in your back pocket. For covered emergencies, Legal Shield is here for you 24/7, plans to fit any stage of life. The State of Freedom is proud to be teamed up with Legal Shield as clients and affiliates. To learn more or to sign up, visit the Shop Our Partners page on freedomstate.us or check out the link in the show notes. Thank you for supporting the State of Freedom. The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.